researchers to access the data for legitimate research. That's the whole point of what we're doing. So the first thing is accountability. So meaning that you need to be accountable for the use of this data. So if someone shares data with you, you're accountable for that data. So you're now in possession of it, and how you use that data needs to be valid. You are accountable for it. So I think that's probably one of the biggest changes that's happened in maybe the last 10 years, maybe, in data, is the concept of accountability. Because before that, and I was just at fault. I've been working with data in medicine for close to 30 years. So many, many years ago, if someone were to kind of share some data with you and nobody knows about it, right? It was okay. Like, it really was. Like, it really was not uncommon that data sets would be shared. Clinical data sets would be shared with identifiable information. And you would just be like, well, nobody knows about it, so it's okay. And so that's the accountability. So meaning that even if someone sneaks a data set to you, if you know it's not appropriate to use that data, you shouldn't. That's what accountability is. And I think that's changed a lot, as I said, in the last 5 to 10 years. So it's no longer, it shouldn't be that, if you get away with it, it's okay. It should be that you don't feel right doing it. Okay, that's the important difference, because that's the only way you're going to get through any of this, by the way. And I don't know what the landscape is like in India. I really don't. Like, I mean that, because I've never worked in India. So I don't know. But I can tell you in North America anyway, that's the way it's going. The onus is on you for accountability. What is right? What is wrong? You decide what you should do. So making decisions about the use of the systems and who can be affected by the outcome is why you're doing it, right? So I think that's the flip side of the coin. So if you decide on a fantastic, exciting project, based on the presentations yesterday, that's what you want to do. That's great. So what you're trying to do is change, improve patient outcome, right? You're trying to improve the health of the patient in what you do when you're working in medicine. Fantastic. But bear in mind, there may be more outcomes to what you're doing than just affecting health. And I think that's where you need to be careful that if what you're doing is unethical, then maybe doing more harm than good. That's, I think, where you need to be cautious. Okay? And what we're doing in order to resolve this ethical concern, just to, pretty much sum it up, disclosure. Everything, not everything, but mostly in legal terms, anywhere in the world, disclosure is probably one of the most important things, and documentation is another. So why is that? The reason being is, the laws that govern all countries are agreed upon by everybody who lives in the country. Correct? That's how laws come to be. So the challenge is, how can you show that you're following the law? So, of course, if you think of criminal law, well, that's a bit extreme, right? So how do you show that you're not killing people? Well, it's going to be kind of obvious, right? And if you get caught by the police, well, you go to jail. So I'm not talking about that. That's kind of obvious. But how about laws, for instance, of these ones for ethics, or anything to do with privacy, which is law? Privacy is law. Ethics is not law. Privacy is law. Okay? So how do you show that you are actually following the law for privacy? Who's going to know? There's no privacy police. Who's going to knock on your door and check your computer? So how would you be able to show someone that you followed the law? You have to document. I know it sounds very boring, but when you do research, that's what you must do. You must document what you've done, how you've done it, why you're doing it. And because of that, and disclose, and because of that, even if you make a mistake, there's a breach, share information you should not have. If you documented how you were trying to follow the law, you'll be okay. You'll be okay. You'll be forgiven. You might have a tiny fine or something like that. You know, no big deal. They'll just tell you don't do that again, right? But if you have not documented what you did, and you have no way of showing that you actually tried to do your best, you will be found guilty. Okay? So that's an important concept that is not just in this world, but it's in anything you're going to do in our world. Document and disclose. Most important things ever. Okay? I'm not going to go too much into detail over this, but because it can get really onerous and there's a lot of detail. But essentially, what you want to understand is who owns, who's in control, and who uses. Okay, that's probably what you would like to keep in mind. So when I say who owns the data? Who owns healthcare data? Who owns it? Yeah, you do. It's your data. No matter what anybody says, it's yours. Don't think any differently. It's your data, and you decide who you share that data with. So who controls the data? But do you? There's the problem. There's the problem. Do you control your healthcare data? The hospital does, right? So just think of it. Let's say this is my drive, right? My pen drive. So if I had all my healthcare data, all of it, all my lab tests, all of my, X-rays, MRIs, medical reports, all of it was on here. All of it. Nowhere else, just on here. Then I own this and I control this. Because then when I go see my physician, I'm going to say, here's my history. And he's going to read it. And then say, oh, okay, well, let's do this, and we're going to change your medication, and thank you for coming. And then he gives this back to me. And I go, there we go. That would be ideal. But it does not exist that way anywhere in the world. Okay, exactly. You can have a copy of it, but it exists in the healthcare systems of the world. So that's why you have who controls the data. So who controls the data are custodians. They're called custodians of data. They're responsible for controlling your data, and that is the healthcare professional. Okay? Healthcare professionals control your data, and they are responsible for your data. That's a big responsibility for them. Okay? If they inappropriately share your data, they get fired. So it's a big deal. Okay? So it's a big responsibility for healthcare providers. But just understand, you don't really control your data. I'd love to be able to lie to you and say, yeah, of course you do. No, you don't. Okay? So you need to be aware of that. And so those are the rights that you have that we as researchers have to abide to. And that's where we're accountable and responsible. So remember I said, whose data does it belong to? Who controls the data and who uses the data? So researchers are going to use the data. Physicians use the data, of course, as well to do their job, right? So they're users as well. As researchers, and that's what we're here for, is, we use the data as well. So we need to be mindful of that process. So you need to be mindful of that process. Remember who owns the data, who controls the data, and who uses it. So when you use that data, you need to make sure that you're using it in an ethical way and without breaching policy or laws, which is privacy. Does that make sense? That's really all you need to remember. An ethical use of data, if you don't understand ethics, not an easy thing. Don't feel bad. Ask someone. Okay? But ethics is very complex. And it basically comes down to morality. That's what. So ethical, there's no, I mean, there are some, standards based on Nuremberg, and so definitely that's where we started. But there are standards, right, that what's ethical and what's not. So what's fair and what's not. What's, inequality or abuse of authority, right? So those kind of things is where ethics come into play. You have to understand where I live and where you live are different societies, different cultures, different laws, different government, different everything. So that means morally, what's morally right here in India may be different in Canada. So remember that ethics is governed by morality. What is morally right, what is acceptable in your society is what drives ethics. So you have to ask, don't ask me, what your ethics are. Ask yourselves what your ethics are, right? So make sure you talk to your ethics boards, what's called ethics boards, which you're going to have to talk to in all of your institutions or universities or anywhere you're going to do research. You're going to have to make sure that your research is approved by these ethics boards whenever you're involving. Okay, so ethical research in humans. Is there ethical research with animals? Yes, actually. There's ethics for animals, the fair treatment of animals. And that's it's once you think of it, it's pretty straightforward, right? It kind of makes sense that you want to do research that's going to be fair, right? And it's not going to basically be abusive, right? It's not going to take advantage of people in order to perform your research. It all stems from the Germans, right, in the Second World War, who experimented on humans. And it was, on the flip side, it kind of really gave a big boost to medicine. It sounds really ridiculous, right? It was extremely unethical. However, the knowledge that was acquired in that short period of time, that's very sad. And that's the reason that we had the Nuremberg trials, ethics, was that there is this draw. Say, if we experiment, we're going to learn so much. But at what cost? So it's not appropriate to experiment on humans because it's fair. Right? It's not fair. Like, why would it be right for us to do a clinical trial where we would deprive one arm of treatment and the other one with treatment? Not fair. So that's a good example. You're going to do some testing of treatment, and you're going to withdraw the standard of care to a group of patients, and you're going to give it to another. So all the patients that you're not treating aren't getting treated. It's not fair, is it? Right? So that's an example of ethics. You would not do that. All the patients that are not getting treated, and you're going to wait, let's say 5 years or something, and then, oh, look at that. The ones that weren't treated are all dead. Well, I guess our treatment's good. Well, come on. There's got to be a better way to test our treatment than to have a whole arm in a study die for you to realize that the treatment's good. Okay? That's a very drastic example of ethical research. Okay? All right. So, enough of ethics. So, value alignment is a big deal, and we already touched on it earlier this week. And that was machines, engage in human communities like ours, right? And there are what's called autonomous agents. We've talked about that, AI agents, right? Then those agents will be expected to follow the community's social and moral norms. Sounds familiar, right? A necessary step in enabling machines to do so is to identify these norms. But whose norms? So once again, it's the same thing. It's your norms. It's where you do your work, right? And you need to realize that AI doesn't understand your norms, and so you need to impart that on your research, on your agents. Okay? So make sure you understand why it has to align, which makes sense, totally. But it's the second clause here that's important, right? Humans use contextual factors, experiences, memories, upbringing, cultural norms. That's a big one here in India. Your culture is very diverse, and right? In order to make a decision in judging between right and wrong. That's the key. Just because you believe in different things, we all believe in different things all over the globe, right? So that doesn't change anything. But what does it impact the most for you as an engineer is this. Making a Because, you would think it's easy to make a decision between right and wrong. But wow, it really isn't. Because of everything I just said here. There's so much contextual factors that influence your ability to make a decision. So you need to make sure that any AI that you are building takes that into it. Because if I were to build software in Canada based on my culture, my society, my norms, my moral rights, and then I sell it to you here in India, do you think it will fit? Not necessarily. I mean, maybe, depending on what it is. But probably not. There's going to be a few things that are not going to fit because that's not how you see the world in India. Does it make it right or wrong? No, it's just different. It's just not a fit. So I'm not here to preach to you. I'm not here to say that, be a good person. And not at all. I'm here being very practical. If you want to build an algorithm that's going to be adopted and used and beneficial, you need to do this. So from a business perspective, I do this very specifically to make sure I'm successful in the market I'm selling. So if I create an algorithm and I want to sell it for profit, my job is to understand your culture so that my application will be successfully sold in India. Does that make sense? By the way, I have never sold in India. But who knows, maybe that will change. But that's the challenge you guys are facing, okay? And then this is just, we've already talked about this. So basically, AI just doesn't understand this. It just does not have those experiences drawn, and you need to share that with AI. So you, the designer and developer, right, need to do this. Okay? I think we've kind of touched on all this. Yeah, I mean, this is just kind of how I'm going to go through this in the next presentation. So just to give you an idea of how we get through this. But why do we do this? Most importantly, of course, who's the user? Trust and approval from the patients. That's key. Okay? If you don't have trust and approval from the patients, who expect what? What do patients expect? Disclosure. They expect disclosure. They expect transparency. They do not want to have anything hidden from them. Okay? And so then this is what you need to do when you're putting together, your solution. Okay. So we've talked a lot about explainability, and I'm just going to touch on it really quickly. Yeah. So basically, we've talked about explainability, right? So explainability. There's a difference between explainability and interpretability, right? So explainability is you, the engineers. So explainability means that you need to be able to explain how your model works, right? We've talked about that. Make sense? And it's at the model level. Interpretability is the grad cam heat map. That we've seen so many of them yesterday. And you guys did them. You guys made some heat maps. That's interpretability. That means that the physician can actually look at that map and say, oh, I concur. I would have thought the same thing when I look at that image where that red area is. Yeah, that's what I would have looked at. That's interpretability. Not explainability, it's interpretability. Both are very important. So why do we need it? It is for this. It is for transparency. How is a patient who is not a researcher, not a developer, how are you as a patient going to be able to understand that what was done, what is being done is ethical, is appropriate, is fair? How are you going to know? You're only going to know if it's explained to you. And that's the purpose of explaining. It's actually going to be law in Canada. And I don't know in India. I did a little research in India, but I don't know if that law is going to come to pass in India. But it is a requirement for all AI to be explainable in Canada. Soon. Law hasn't passed. It's still stuck in government. But it will. It's just any sold, any ADA put on ADA. That's the law. Any software that's going to be put on the market needs to be explainable. You need to have a second opinion and et cetera, et cetera. But the most important thing is that it needs to be explainable. Okay, so the reason we do this, and we've already touched on this, is fairness, right? So just remember that. You want to minimize bias. We've talked a lot about bias, right? So just remember that's the reason we do it. Now I'm going to zip through these just to remind you, or not even remind you, we haven't covered it. But I've talked to you about biases that exist in the data, like classification, that kind of stuff. Let me just quickly go through a few biases that maybe you wouldn't have thought of. Unconscious biases. So overestimating certain events that are greater, due to greater availability is the biggest problem in our world of engineering, right? They're called shortcuts, right? So the algorithm is inherently lazy. All algorithms are inherently lazy. They look for the easiest way to satisfy your requirements. That will never change. Okay? So if you give it the ability to find a solution through a shortcut, it's called a shortcut, it will do it. So you need to be very aware of that. And it can be something silly, like on X-rays, for instance. If you have an X-ray, and all the ones that you're interested in have a certain marking on the X-ray. And all the ones that are negative or whatever you're not interested in don't have that marking. And it's because when they were labeling the X-rays or something like that, they put a little mark on the X-ray to say that, oh, that one's interesting. Look at that one. So that's a classic example of a shortcut, right? And your algorithm is going to find that little mark. And then it's not going to look at all of the X-ray. It's just going to look at that little mark. So the next time you feed it an X-ray that just doesn't, from another institution that didn't mark them, it's not going to work. Okay? So some of the unconscious biases that you can think of is like an empathy gap, stereotyping. Those are good ones to go over, right? So empathy gap is tendency to underestimate the influence or strength of feeling. And stereotyping, I'm sure you guys know, right, is a member of a group to have certain characteristics without having actual information to that individual. So these are kind of data collection biases that can happen. And you just need to think of them, as developers, and say, I wonder if, the data that I've collected, that I've received from the institution, might have that, okay? And that is, culturally embedded. Because depending on the institution you're in, the hospital, or wherever, the way they collect data, the way they serve their patients, the way they collect information on their patients may be influenced by culture or whatever. Okay, so you just need to be aware of that. Okay? And there's a whole bunch of them. These are all fun terms, right? Anchoring bias, relying too much on one trait or piece of information which makes decisions. That's so common, right? Because you think of it, when you go see your physician and say, hey, what data can you share with me, right? Well, they always say, well, I got a lot of this. And they always have a lot of that. Well, that's an anchoring bias, okay? Bandwagon, believe things because many other people do, all the time. That's like adoption of technology, right? Adoption of AI can be split up into basically three groups. The rule of thirds and in medicine, there's all these rules that, people go, hey. So the rule of thirds in this case is you have 1/3 of early adopters. That's us. We love it. Think of it. You're all here because you're interested in AI. I'm here because I like talking about AI. Right? Perfect. So we're all happy together. That's the 1/3. Then you have another third of people that are these guys, the bandwagon bias. So the bandwagon is, well, I got this really good friend, and they think AI is really cool. Okay, I think AI is cool. right? That's another third. And then you have the 1/3 that says, I'm not interested in AI over my dead body. Not doing it. Lots of physicians like that. Not doing it. Don't believe in it. I know better. So, and that's reality. That's the three groups. So how do you think you fix the problem of the 1/3 not doing it? How do you fix that? Okay, so working on convincing them, correct? Working on encouraging them to see the light. Yeah, showing them examples and all that. So what do you guys think? Do you think you're going to be successful? Do you have anybody like that? How about your parents? Do some of your parents, I'm not talking about AI, but for your parents, you really want to convince them that using your phone is really not a bad thing. Right? How successful are you at changing your parents' mind? So you show them. You say, look, mom and dad, man, look what I can do on my phone. I got this, I got that. I have my schedule on here. I know. How successful are you guys? Has anyone here actually convinced their parents, and their parents now say, oh yeah, wow, that's fantastic. Thank you for showing me that. Oh, I hadn't thought of that. Please use your phone. Who's had that happen to them? Yeah, 0, right? 0. Okay, so when you're talking to physicians who don't believe in AI, it's exactly the same thing. They are not going to agree with you no matter what you say. I'm telling you that, okay? So who can you convince? The second third. The bandwagon people, those are the people you should be targeting. Because then 2/3 of everybody is with you, right? You got us, and then you got the second third. So what do you do with the third that's not going to do it? How do we solve that problem? Fine. They retire and die. I'm being very pragmatic. Okay? They do. You just give it time, and they will all retire and go away, and they will die, and will no longer be giving their opinion that AI sucks. And this isn't just for AI. This is for anything. Anything that society needs to deal with, any technology society deals with, that's the way it works. So then all we need to do is be patient. Is there anything wrong with being patient? Not at all. You don't want to rush anything. Because we could be wrong. We could be completely wrong about it. You realize that, right? Maybe Skynet is going to happen. Wouldn't that suck? Because I've always said it's never going to happen. I could be wrong. Skynet, end of the world. Bummer. It's a reality. It could happen. So, not really. But seriously, it's good to take your time, all right, in delivering your new technology. Okay. A whole bunch of other biases. I just wanted to, I'm not even going to go through these because it would be ridiculous. You'd all fall asleep. But I just want to say there are so many of them. Pay attention. Okay? Pay attention to all the biases that can influence your data. And yeah, I think so. Now I'm going to go. I'm going to ask questions, and then I have one last presentation, which is going to be a little bit more. Well, I'm not even going to go with resolving bias because you guys know what it is, right? You just have to identify them. As soon as you identify them, it's easy to resolve. Okay? Yeah. So, can you bring up my second? So, do you have anybody have questions on ethics, biases? Yeah. So the features? What do you mean features? So how are they? Yeah. In weights? What are they, weights? Weights. The numeric weights. Not the raw data. So you're going to keep the weights, and you're going to share the weights so other people can retrain. So that's a great question. And so, as in, you always answer, as a statistician, you're trained, to always answer with, it depends. True, it does depend. So, the question is very good in that it actually has caused a lot of grief in the industry. And that is collect a bunch of data, train on it, do it, result in embeddings, weights, right? That the future. That's actually how the model works. You don't actually have the raw data in your phone when it's running the algorithm. You only have the weights. So the question then is, can we share the weights? Because obviously it's not identifiable at all. It's like summary data, right? It's all summarized. Correct? Yes. No. So the yes is it's not unethical at all. It's breach of privacy at all. So in that sense, yeah, absolutely. Make it public. It's actually a good thing, make it public. It's great, it's going to promote research. So here's where the problem is. How was the data collected? It was unethical. Story over, right? Okay. When you collected the data, what was the agreement? What was the legal agreement with the party that you were dealing with? Discard the data. But was there anything in the agreement about sharing the weight? Yeah, so whoops, problem. So technically you should go back and ask. If you have a lawyer, you're rich enough to have a lawyer, then you say, who cares, sue me. Fine. But if you're not, probably better to ask, hey, by the way, would it be okay if we share the weight? You should probably ask. Okay, so it comes down to legality. So it's not you're not going to get charged by privacy law, but you could be sued by whoever gave you the data. Okay, so that's what you do. Okay? And that's a common thing. So where did this pop up? Because what they did, they scraped the internet just for all information. And they were caught, hey, wait a minute, you shouldn't have done that. And they're like, oh, sorry. Well, it's all in our weights, and there's nothing you can do about it. So you do need to be careful. So then it becomes a legal thing. So it's no longer a privacy issue. It's, whatever. And they even said, hey, it's on the internet. It was publicly available. So, why can't we? Well, that comes down to what I started this whole talk about, which is accountability. Right? That's the question that happens. Just because you can do it doesn't make it right for you to do it. If you find data on the internet that shouldn't be there, yay, I can use it. Just remember, if you're okay with that, good for you. But you have to be careful. Okay, so is that good to answer the question? Anybody else, any questions? Yep. Yep. Perfect. Yep. Yep. Perfect. Yep. Yeah. Okay, I know your question. Excellent. And so, by the way, I'm happy to answer questions. Talk about this is not my. The only reason I talk about it, I've done it so long, but I'm not an expert. That's not my. Just disclaimer. Okay. So, to answer your question, so what you need to do is RAB. So then what you're asking them, data, optimize, lab, use it for research, essentially, without consent. that's the appropriate. Absolutely. Okay? And it's not fair. So, I mean, there are different laws around the world, and there are actually different laws within our own country in Canada. That some provinces, so we don't have states, we have provinces, some provinces say once data is de-identified, anonymized, it no longer falls under privacy law. Sense, right? How could it? So if that's the case, as soon as you have data that's de-identified, anonymized, you do whatever you want with it. It doesn't fall under privacy law. You're not breaking any privacy law, right? Other provinces will say, yeah, sure, but how did that data get anonymized? So if you had the right to anonymize that data by consent of the patients, good. But if someone anonymized it without consent, no good. So it all depends on your state in India, how it would be read. But best practice, ask ethics. Because they will just, usually, I mean, you got to hope they're nice. They're not always, but, hopefully they're nice. So when you ask them, they're just going to say, for sure, thank you for asking. Absolutely, you can use the data because we see no harm. We understand your research. You already have ethics. So you're asking for an amendment, right? You're asking for a change in ethics. And it's just to take up a little bit more data. And they just say, no problem. How could we ask for consent when we don't even know who it is, right? And they're going to give it to you. But then you're okay. By just doing it, you could get in trouble. Sound good? Okay. So what I did here, I have two sloppy guys. Anyway, it is what it is. So I'm just doing a comparative framework for Canada versus India on how we step through this. Okay? And yeah, maybe I'll let's go to the decision tree. So do you need trial registration or device approval? So this is exactly what we talked about, I think we started talking about yesterday. And essentially, you as developers are going to want to put together a solution, correct? So we talked about a whole bunch of them. We have 2 more presentations today. And that is, what do we have to be aware of in the world of medicine, right, in healthcare? So the first thing, we've already talked about it, is will the app or project, whatever, result in what's called software as a medical device? So it's not a medical device, per se. It is. But it's software that's acting as a medical device. It's actually making clinical decisions. Okay? If it is, then regulatory pathways apply, and we've talked about that. So in Canada, okay, the first thing we would need to do, if we're doing a project, is we would have to register with the investigational testing authorization, so the ITA. We have to get that, register with them and get that authorization. In India, it's called the CLA approval, and there's a form. No clue what that is. But that's what you guys have to do in India, and that's the equivalent to the ITA in Canada. So that means if it is going to be a clinical study, you need to get approval from the CLA. Now, I have a glossary at the end of the CLA standard. If it's not going to be SMB, so it's not a clinical decision-making tool, skip it. No regulatory compliance, yay, you don't have to do that. Okay, so that's for regulatory compliance. So remember, regulatory compliance, I know especially for the young crowd here, right? Feel like just talking about stuff, like you're talking about something that's completely unrelated to anything you ever dreamt you'd hear about. But the thing is one day, someone here is going to say, oh, I really want to develop software that, can be used. And you go, what did that bald guy talk about? Like, you guys remember that talk? Anyway, that's when you're going to use it, okay? So step 2 is it interventional? Okay? So the difference between regulatory and interventional, regulatory just means it's used in a clinical setting for but not necessarily clinical. In any kind of setting that makes a clinical decision, right? So any kind of medical decision, healthcare decision. That's regulatory, meaning you can actually use your device in clinic. That's what that means. It's just regulatory. Now, when you're doing research, you need to know, is the study interventional? Interventional means clinical experimentation. You don't like to use the word experimentation, really, because we're not experimenting on humans. That sounds terrible. But we're doing an interventional study. Okay? It's a form of experimentation. So if you are, meaning you're doing a drug trial, try this drug, see if it's better than what we are currently offering. So see the way I worded that? Right? So what we're currently offering is the standard practice, right? What you do, what everybody gets, so it's fair. Everybody gets this treatment today. And this other arm, this other group of patients are going to get this new drug. Ooh, and we're going to see if it works, okay? So that's an interventional study. That requires oversight. So if yes, then you must register the trial. So in Canada, we do what's called clinicaltrials.gov, which is in the United States. There's another group, ISRCTN. And you just register. You just literally list it saying, I'm going to do this research. And that means that anybody in the world can look this up and say, oh, they're doing that research over there, right? So it's just a way of disclosure. Remember I said disclosure, right? So that's what it means. In India, actually, interestingly, it's mandatory to register with CPRI. Whatever that is. Okay. So, yeah, you know all about it. So you must register your trial there, okay? If no, it's observational, what in medicine is called observational. So there's no experiment, right? There's no intervention. We're just observing something. You don't have to register the trial. No requirement, okay? But you do need ethics board approval and privacy compliance. Talked about, to no end, right? Inevitably, of course, with the trial registration, you also need ethics and privacy. Okay. Anyway, before I go to that, any questions on that? So you see the suddenly, most of you are like, oh my God, I don't want to work in healthcare. Let me go back to finance, I'm telling you, working in medicine is brutal. It is. I've been working in it my entire life, pretty much. And it's very challenging. But the only thing is, and all students that end up in my lab, all of them say this, very rewarding. The majority of the students that enter my lab don't come from healthcare. They come from finance, they come from engineering, lots of students. And they all come to me because they say, I want to apply my skills in an area that I know is having an impact. So, building new cars is impactful. Let's be fair, it is impactful. But there are certain people that just feel that helping other humans like them is what they enjoy and is what is impactful. Okay, so any questions on that? No? It's not easy, but the thing is you can look it up. But just remember, regulatory, interventional. So regulatory is for the sale of product on the market that is involved, that needs regulation. Okay? That's regulatory. Intervention is research. So interventional study is at the research. Okay? So if it is a SAMB, do you need to do this immediately? No. Probably the first thing is going to be this one, the intervention. Okay, do your research first. Because if it fails, then you're not going to go to regulatory because you don't have a product. Okay? So that's probably the way it works, right? So if you look at your timeline, I made this up completely, right? So the timeline is, define your use case and classify what kind of app you're doing. It's going to 1 to 2 weeks. But let's say 1 to 2 weeks. The next step, REB ethics approval. All right? Get that ethics approval. The problem is, it takes 8 to 12 weeks is really optimistic. That's really optimistic. Okay? 3 months is optimistic. Very often it takes 6 months to go. Okay? I don't know about in India. I'm guessing it's probably similar. It takes a long time. Then, once you get ethics, then you can, if you have a SND, you can think of your IPA, right? So registering. CTA, it's a CTA for drugs and biologics. CIHR in Canada is the Canadian Institute for Health Research. So they want you to register your trial, remember, with clinicaltrials.gov. In Canada, right, PIPEDA and PHIPAA, that's our privacy laws. Okay? And so we would need to make sure we're compliant. Then you get into recruitment, adverse event monitoring if you're doing an interventional trial, which means that you have to, legal, that you actually have to monitor if any patients are being hurt. Of course. And so then you're going to do that. And then results reporting. Okay, so how about India? So same thing. Define your use case and classify. In this case, your ethics, IEC, there's a whole bunch of words. REB, IEC, it's all ethics, right? Ethics committee. And then you're going to do your CLA, as we said, your CTRI, whatever that is. For you in India for privacy, it's your DPDB, okay? And I don't know what the ABDM is in integration, but anyway, so it's some kind of privacy law, and you can do that in parallel. And then you go into your recruitment. Of course, you're going to be doing adverse event reporting. Everything else is going to be the same, right? Yes, and then post-trial documentation and reporting. Okay, so what are the contrasts? You know, it's funny. I thought there'd be major contrasts. It's not really. It's quite similar, right? The only thing, this one here, mandatory injury compensation. That's interesting. I was like, so you know, inevitably, what if you do hurt somebody? What if you do hurt somebody? Oops, problem. Right? So in India, it's actually compulsory that you have to compensate people. Okay? So that is a big one difference. In Canada, I'm not saying that we don't compensate people. We do, but it's a little different, right? So it's not compulsory to compensate. It's going to be in the courts, basically. You'll get sued. Okay, so CIHR reporting deadlines are enforced. Compensation is via institution, so it's at the institutional level, not at the government level. It's pretty minor. Timelines faster for non-SAMD. I would say, if I had to hazard a guess, I would say most of it should be a little quicker in India because your level of oversight is a little less than in Canada. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. It's just you're growing. You know, you're getting there. And the more it gets complex and the more there's issues, the slower it takes, right? So I would say in India you're probably going to be a little quicker, a little slower in Canada, right? Well, here's the glossary of terms. CTRI, Clinical Trials Registry of India. What was the other one? CTA, Clinical Trial Application. No, that's us. ITA. No, that's Canada. What was the other one for India? ABDM. I can't even read that. You see that from here? That's amazing. Wow, I can barely read it here and you read it up. But you know it. I'm just kidding. You know it. So excellent. MDR. So they put down MDR. I'll tell you what that is in a sec. IEC, Institutional Ethics Committee. Yeah. So I guess maybe you call it that, institutional. Is that what you call it here in India? Institutional Ethics Committee, IEC. Okay. So we call it REB, or in Canada it's REB, Research Ethics Board. Right. IRB, Institutional Research Board. Yeah. Whatever. Anyway, so there's different ways of saying. So the one I wanted to pick up was MDR 2017. So MDR is a standard for medical devices in Europe. So obviously there's going to be some overlap because you guys can adopt whatever you want, right? You can do FDA if you want. Okay, that's it. I just wanted to go back to comparative framework. Did we touch everything? Yeah, we did. Ethics, compensation. Yep. Covered it all. No, this one here, ethics. Woo, there we go. Last one. So in Canada, in order to be the boss, the PI, the principal investigator, you have to have ethics training. Okay? So you learn about ethics, how it was developed, where it is, what's right, what's wrong, all that kind of stuff, what you should know, why you do it, all that stuff. And for us, it's called TCPS, right, and REB. And so that's training that's required. In India, it's called ICMR guidelines and IEC. So there are ethics in India as well, and you need to be aware of that if you're going to be a researcher. So you guys as engineers right now, you know, you're going to be participating at a level probably you're not going to require it. But if you become a professor in the area, then inevitably, if you're going to be a guy, you're going to have that. Okay. Okay. Any questions on that? But joking aside, you'll remember, some of you, one day, are going to remember, what the heck was he talking about? I need to know now, right? Because you do. You really do. If you want to be successful at taking a project to the community, you have to know all that. Okay? So I think my job being here is not to show you content, because you can all ChatGPT now, right? Content's easy now. Right? So if you need to know something, you look it up. Ooh, whoopee. You don't need me to tell you that. You don't need me to tell you how to code. Do I? Right? What you do need is somebody to encourage you to do it and to tell you you can do it. But anybody can just stand up here and say, you can do it. But, mom and dad just says that every day before you leave for the day. You can do it. We love you. We love you, child. You're amazing, right? Your parents say that all the time. But does that actually get you to do something? No. What gets you to do it is to see someone else who has done it, right? And who can share with you the experiences of how ridiculously challenging it is, or, oh, don't forget to look for this, or don't forget to do that. That's the piece that you don't find on ChatGPT. You're actually starting to kind of find it a little bit, but not really. So I think that's what you're supposed to walk away from this course with, is not just a lot of facts, but more, I can do that. I think I can do that. It's something I'd like to try. And probably the biggest step for you guys, because it's the same in Canada, is moving from doing something like the projects you've done. They're great. But do you see how easy that was? Let's be brutally honest, right? How hard were your projects? Like, really? Was that the hardest thing you've ever done in your life? Really? Right? No, it wasn't. Like, seriously, anybody can build a classifier in like an afternoon. Like, seriously. You just pulled a data set off the internet and then ran it, and you produce your accuracy. And you're like, ooh, that's exciting. Come on, man. It's not, right? You know that. So what is exciting is to do that and actually have a physician use it in their clinic. That's exciting. But do you see how difficult it is to get it to the clinic? Right? So ironically, the algorithms you did in this course potentially could actually be used in clinic. Right? If you got really good accuracy, why wouldn't it be able to be used in clinic? Well, the reason it can't be is because of everything I just talked about today. If you don't have access to people in clinic, you did not prepare, so meaning the way you collected your data was not appropriate, then when regulators and REB comes to you and says, wow, I love your algorithm. That's fantastic. I think that's a great idea. So tell me, where did you get your data? How did you collect your data? How did you validate your data? How did you validate the way you designed your algorithm to make sure you don't hurt patients? Did you do all that? So did you guys do any of that? None of that. You didn't even think of that, did you? That's where it's hard. Okay? Training algorithms is easy. But thinking of how you're going to do this work so that someone can use it for real in clinic is not easy. That's the hard part. Okay? And if you contribute to that, you're going to move down the path, right, to getting something in the clinic, which ultimately is really cool. And if that's not what you're interested in, if you just heard me say, after today's lecture, you say, oh my God, that's the last thing I want to do, that's okay too. But you have to realize your role. So if your role as an engineer is to help me do this, then that's fine. That's your role. You're not interested in doing this. Not interested. That's not for me. I don't care. What I do care about is coding. I'm really jazzed about coding. Then just realize what you want to do, right? You want to help me improve my model so that I can use it in clinic. Good. Good for you. That's great. But at least you know what you want to do, right? And I think today, or this week, hopefully this helps you make that decision. Decide where you are in the path, in the pipeline, whether you want to do the whole thing or just a part of it. Who knows? Maybe someone here has decided, I want to go into medicine. That happens all the time in my lab. I have engineers that come into my lab and they're like, oh yeah, I love coding. And then once they participate at this level, they go, I want to go to med school. And they go to med school and they become a physician. It happens all the time. All the time. So who knows? Maybe someone here will decide to go into medicine. Right? But that's ultimately what you should be thinking, is where do I fit in the process? How can I contribute to the process? And where am I happiest in the process? Right? Okay. Questions? Tea time? We good? Awesome. Let's do tea.
Hello, 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 hello.
Hello. A warm welcome to you all. After the break, we are proceeding for the project presentation. Great things are never done by one person, they are done by a team of people, Steve Jobs. So, we are having the project presentation of team 6 and 7 and then followed by open discussion and question and answer with our resource person, Dr. Pascal, for the clearing sessions. Over to team 6.
Good morning, everyone. Our project is about heart disease detection with machine learning. So, these are the contents. And what is heart disease? It is like about 32% of all deaths occurring globally. Heart disease is a major one. Around 18 million deaths annually. And types of heart disease: coronary heart disease, heart failure, arrhythmia. And what is coronary heart disease? It is like a blockage in the arteries with a substance called plate. And what is heart failure? When the heart muscle itself would not be able to pump the blood to the body. And what is arrhythmias? It is like heart is beating too fast or too slow. And the risk factors from which we can identify this is high blood pressure, cholesterol, smoking, diabetes, obesity, all other factors. And early detection can reduce the mortality up to 80%. So we can suggest lifestyle changes or medication with detecting it earlier. And the challenges we are going to face is like our existing challenges like traditional diagnosis with ECG blood test is time consuming and costly.
This is our problem statement. Our goal is to develop a predicted heart disease presence using patient data. Why machine learning? Machine learning is a manual analysis of features like age and cholesterol is error prone and time consuming. Machine learning automates and improves accuracy. The applications are like early screening in hospitals, variable devices, telemedicine platforms. The challenges are imbalanced data. Then these are the objectives we have used in our project to study and pre-process publicity available heart disease dataset to implement different machine learning algorithms for predictive modeling to evaluate and compare modelers using accuracy on a key performance metrics. So,
Yeah, so I'll be continuing with the methodology part. So we have taken a simple, like how to say, machine learning algorithms. So these are the data set. This is the data set which we have used, heart disease. I can show you from where I got it. So this is the website where I got the data set. So here we have in total 303 instances, that many samples we have, and we have 13 features. So I can show you the features. So these are the features which we are going to use in our work. So we are considering age, sex, and some kind of cholesterol level, and whether the person has a chest pain or not, and some kind of things like I'm not into how to say clinician. I'm not a clinician, so I don't know a few of the variable names. So, like even the fasting blood sugar level, it is more than 120 mg, those things. So those are the features which we have used, and these are the. This is just a snippet of my code. So we have used UCMLR repository, and from there, ID number 45 is our hard disease data set where we can find, and these are the metadata of the data set. And so these are the features which we obtain. Everything is numerical values. Okay, we have not explored anything related to image, just a numerical. We have worked on numerical data. It had like few NAN files. So what we have done, we have removed the NAN files, and it is a multi-classification approach. So we have in total 5 categories. One is healthy, and 4 are like severity kind of things, like 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. 0 is the healthy person's data, and it is imbalanced. So 0 data is 164, and rest of the things 55, 36, 35, and 13. So we can see that it is imbalanced. For sure, we are going to get the less accuracy for this. We tried to apply some smooth techniques also, but we did not like able to achieve good results here. This is just what we have done. So we have considered 80-20 training test split data. 80% for training, 20% for testing, and just we have like worked on 3 algorithms. Like random forest, we just wanted to try the different parameter. N estimators like 50, 150, 100 we have taken, and this is just we have made it simple. And this is what we got, classification report, and final result I can show you. This is our final result. These are our final results. So back to presentation. So that's what I just explained. So this is our data set overview, and these are the features which we have used, and I explained which and all algorithms we have used, and these are the results. Yes. So
I thought there was a timer. I'm like,
yeah,
wow.
even I thought.
You guys are strict
So
today.
these are the tests which we have used. No, even I thought. So thank you. Thank you. That's it.
You have
to like more techniques and all we can oversampling the data we can do.
Sure. So this is your outcome, correct? These
These
categories?
these are the values. You want
Right.
me to show the
That's your outcome, correct? That's what it's. That's a risk score. I'm assuming, correct? Is that a risk score?
No, those are the samples actually. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are the classes
The classes of what?
of heart disease. 0 is the normal healthy person
Yeah.
samples,
One is-
and 1, 2, 3 are the mild, moderate. Whether they have a chance.
Right. So it's
Yes.
So that's what I said. Yeah. So it's a risk of developing heart disease or having heart disease. Right. Okay. So you probably don't know, but there's a very, very large successful study in the United States called the Framingham study that has done this like it's the gold standard of the world. So for risk assessment, you use what's called the Framingham risk score. Very similar to this, based on almost the same thing. Right? So my question would be, how could you improve on the Framingham risk score, which would be very difficult, but it can be. And so my question is, how are you going to do that? Because really what you presented here is you use SVM in order to satisfy a linear statistical model, something that you could have done way before machine learning, right? So there's no really need for machine learning at this level, right? But I appreciate what you're doing if you're trying to extend.
Just I wanted to the thing is all of the students are new to machine
No,
learning.
exactly. But
So
that's why I'm asking you, is you got to show all your new students why you would do machine learning. Because right now you haven't really shown them. You've just applied machine learning to a statistical, classical statistical problem for classification of risk, right? So then explain to me, what would you need to do, and why would you? What do you think machine learning could bring? This is a very hard question, so I'll be kind. But this is a very hard question. So how do you see what can machine learning bring to this exact problem? If, as you say, you have more data, I'm going to give you unlimited data. Do you need machine learning for exactly these variables if I give you 250,000 things?
you mean data data
Yeah.
will be more, but how I can achieve better results like
Correct.
that?
Correct.
Okay, so one option is we can work on different machine learning algorithms. Is that a correct?
It's not really what I'm
Yeah,
asking.
we had like a voting of it. We do not practicing what has the vote. So if we can evaluate these features in a much statistical
So feature selection, absolutely. Absolutely. You're right. You're absolutely right. But for machine learning to be successful, you don't need, you need him to choose the features, right? So how can you leverage machine learning to be more successful with him? Have the physical expert as well. But why would you ever need machine learning? Because the Framingham report is actually very successful. It was an amazing experiment. I won't believe it, but it was an amazing experiment. So and working with a physician, you have everything you need for risk assessment. But you're absolutely right. Machine learning can help this, but you need to put your finger on what it is. So what have I said the entire week that machine learning is really good at? What is machine learning very, very good at?
Finding the pattern.
Finding patterns, sure. But in particular, dealing with what? This is the key to everything we do. Machine learning is really good for complexity. Okay? Because you can deal with 14 various features. And you're going to say, pick the ones that are most important, he's going to do that for you. But what if he said, can you pick out of 2,000 features the ones that I need? He's going to say, no, he's going to be taking a lot of money. I'm not doing non-linear relationship. Linearity is fantastic. And why is linearity so fantastic? Because we can understand that. Right? It makes sense. Like linear regression is being, like, like for statistics, that's all I do, right? That right? Yeah, you get coefficients, you need like again, it's inflatable, it's amazing. But how many relationships in real life are actually linear? Probably not that many. So to be able to model non-linearity in a very complex, high-dimensional problem is exactly where machine learning excels at. So I love your project because it's really the beginning, and what you demonstrated is why we need machine learning. Because if we stay here, it's always going to be fraught with limitations. Right? We're not going to be able to do personalized medicine. Right? It's not too crude. Right? We're not going to improve on that risk assessment because we can't understand the complexity of developing risk, which is sadly a very complex problem. Because there are many reasons why you develop plaque in your arteries, and that causes your heart to be unhealthy. And so this is only just barely, definitely some of the variables are already diagnostic. So, wow, this is very limited. But what you could do is amazing, and actually people are doing it. But I would say, yeah, you could absolutely continue this project. But just find data sets that are more complex, right, for sure, so that you can model, you can really try and model risk in that sense, right? Because you're right, that I know that data set, right? So it's so nice that we share it, right? But there are definitely more data sets that you can combine. That's where you can collaborate with once again, similar problem, though, right? You can be diagnostic. At that point, yeah, so exactly. So that, yeah. So there, it seems like nutrition. Come on, guys. You know what I mean? Like, think of that. Here, so it's such a big part of the culture, right? But, like, nutrition is key, right? So you want to be able to assess risk. So you're going to have definitely, genetic, risk, family history. You're going to have living environment, right? So, how active are you and on nutrition? So again, all those, smoking, right? And not only just smoking. So smoking is bad, right? You know, for sure. I'm telling you right now, smoking is bad. However, what you smoke, how much you smoke, it does have an impact, right? Because believe it or not, if you stop smoking, go ahead and just the same. If you guys are smoking now, don't. But if you stop, it's okay, you do it. Like, you're going to recover. Maybe it'll have to give you smoke, but you can recover. So that's it, right? Because depending on how much you smoke, when you smoke, if you stop, that's where the key learning is going to be, for sure. Right? This would be really cool. So anyway, that was great. Thank you.
so there is an announcement. So those who wants participant certificates, okay, it's not attendance, sorry, participants attendance like we have to give, right? So those who wants, please contact Ravishwar sir. So he'll be there in the next room. Okay, so everybody is going to receive the certificate. This is related, I mean regarding that attendance, okay. So you guys can contact Ravishwar sir.
I'll be here.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, you can continue.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dhanushri from Group 7. We are here to present, present our project on dementia detection using machine learning and medical data. And our mentors, Srinath sir and Najib sir, and these are my group members. Introduction. Dementia is a medical condition where the person's memory, thinking ability, language skill and decision making slowly decline. It is not just forgetting things, it is affect daily life like recognizing people, communicating and doing daily tasks. Problem statement. Traditional diagnostic methods for dementia are time consuming, cost effective and may lead to late detection. There is need for an automated, efficient and accurate system that can predict dementia at an early stage using patient data and medical image. Objectives. Our goal is to develop a machine learning model that can predict dementia at an early stage, making diagnosis faster, more accurate and less cost compared to traditional method. A role of AI and machine learning in healthcare. Doctors may rely on scan, medical test and medical history. If you use machine learning, large data set and it can machine learning can analyze large medical data set quickly. In our project we are used MRI scan. It creates a structure of brain. It shows the size and shrinkage of the brain.
So I will be explaining about the methodology. So we used OSS MRI data set and we collected the data, and for data processing we converted the data into 224 by 224 pixel sizes. Then we did feature extraction, and for model selection we used CNN, which stands for convolutional neural networks, and for evaluation we split the data set into two, which is train and test. We did 80-20 and 70-30. So the challenges, we did not get enough data. When we initially came up with this idea, we thought to do with the audio and the text files, but we were unable to get the audio files. And data variability, since different hospitals use different machines and scanners, the data was inconsistent. And since dementia develops slowly, there are many minute changes, so it was very hard to identify. So overfitting risks. With small data set, the memory training failed on new patients, and the accuracy was also high. Instead of generalization, the model may start to memorize the patterns. And this is the tools and technologies we have used. We used the different libraries, and the applications are hospitals and clinics for clinical decision support, etc. So we split the data set into 4 classes, which is the mildly demented, moderately demented, and not demented, and very mildly demented. So this comes the code. So this is the results for 70-30 split. So this one is for 80/20. So here we came across a problem in our model. The accuracy nearly hit 100. That's because our model started to memorize the patterns instead of generalizing them. So this is the comparison table. So to conclude, I request Najib sir to take it.
Conclusion, as my group members they mentioned, dementia is a serious and growing healthy problem. As they mentioned also, dementia is affect brain cells and make damage for these cells. Traditional methods for diagnosis of dementia is slow and expensive. AI and machine learning, especially CNN, can help to detect dementia earlier using MRI and text and audio data. Earlier detection means better treatment, better care plans, and better lives for patient and family. Also, as Sir he mentioned for whole the program, the benefit of the AI and machine learning for diagnosis, earlier diagnosis, and cost effective, also faster diagnosis. So by using AI, I think the patient they will lose the burden and can be impactful. Thank you.
What's the utility walk us through the process.
Input the audio files from the
No. I want your example. What you did. You did MRI for the new audio. So tell me MRI. Because there's nothing wrong with it. I'm just trying to get a grip of what you're going to be doing. So this is the hardest part for engineers to do, right? So you literally need to envision in your mind how this is going to work. So let's go through it, okay? So you're worried about grandma, right? So you come into your physician with grandma, and so what's the physician going to do? He's going to ask grandma a lot of questions. He's going to, and you, you know, he may examine the patient for sure, as well as I didn't even want to go there because Alzheimer's is, yes, the most common form of dementia. However, it is almost extremely rare it's only Alzheimer's. It's always partnered with what's called vascular dementia, which the previous team, T6, you guys should be working together because, unfortunately, when you get vascular problems going to the brain, you cause a form of dementia called vascular dementia. And you almost always get vascular and Alzheimer's together. So what the physician wants to do is say, which one is it? Because if it is something that's fixed, that they can fix, right? Due to circulation, they will. Or infection. You have to rule out infection, a whole bunch of things. So now we have grandma talking to the physician. The physician saying, no, it's not infection. We don't know if it's vascular dementia or Alzheimer's. We need to check. So then you either order an MRI or can you do these laser tests? Because he's going to ask her to remember numbers. There's always tricky, right? So they you know, when you submit a physician, exactly, right? So you come in and you ask your patient, can you please remember these 5 numbers, you know, whatever. And then they say, okay. And then they start talking about something else. It's very naughty. It's very naughty. But they do that, right? So then grandma's like, oh, I've got those 5 numbers. And now we're talking about something else. But then later in the conversation, okay, can you tell me those 5 numbers? Right? So most of us are going to remember some of them. But if you have memory loss, you're going to say, remember what numbers? No, that's going to be terrible, right? But that's what they're doing. So the thing is here's the problem. He's going to know. He's going to know. Right? Because it's not hard to diagnose memory problems. Right? And by the time you diagnose Alzheimer's, it's too late. So really what you want to be doing, so he's not going to order an MRI. It's pretty rare that they order an MRI for like it's too expensive and there's no point. He knows. So all the work that you're doing here is research, really. Very interesting research, because I do the same one. But the reason we do it is to learn the process so that we can give him tools to diagnose it earlier. So early detection of Alzheimer's. And you are going to be able to do that. Use that data. And we need to change it around a little bit. Right? So if that were the case, what do you need in order to improve what you're doing to help your physician? I actually kind of gave it away when I said you need to come up with the other piece that
And important issue is it's all subjective. And so somebody have the memory loss with respect to daily routine things, going to thyroid, eating, etc., life dependent work. And some of them issues with respect to recalling the facts. And some of them they have memory only with respect to their family members. Okay. So there are different issues here, and how one can relate different subjective issues to a lot of data sets when we collect like to the MRI. So that's how it is. Demand higher chances of memory replacement, right? Memory replacement. So it's all very subjective, and they prepare the questionnaire to solve the issues, what exactly the issue, and then how to relate with respect to the part of the brain where can be identified at times. That is the challenging thing.
we do that. It's a fun game. It's like, when you're good at a sport, like, you can do that. And you're like, why is this person next to me, running next to me, not out of breath, barely even doing anything, I'm just ready to die. Well, it's because they do it all the time. So what's important is to express your brain. And then you look at people. Literally, that's what fMRI is, right? When you look at fMRI, you look at blood flow to the brain. And blood flow is increased if you use it. And that's basically what you're doing when you're using your brain. And people say, use your brain. You shouldn't be playing Sudoku. You should be learning a new language. You should be learning to play a new instrument. That's what you should be doing. But no one does it. It's hard. Right? Learning a new language when you're 80. Who wants to do that, right? Nobody wants to do that. But if you continue to learn that, that's pretty much how you're going to exercise your brain. Anyway, great topic. Okay, I'm not sure. I know we got to switch them, but I'm not sure how you switch them. That's on. Actually, why don't we do that? Why don't we just do that? Okay. Okay, let's do some questions. That's all we got left for today. Woo. So we're done. All right. Who has questions? Questions, discussion. Oh, wow, we already have one. Yes. Sure, great question. It's a very new, well, it's not new, but it's a developing area. And the reason it is because people have always avoided it, and now everyone's saying you have to have it, okay? So explainability is the ability to provide clarity and insight into how the model actually does what it does. So you can imagine if you have a linear model, linear relationship that's modeled by linear regression, then your ability to share with everyone how that model works is very easy, because you just need to provide the variables that are in the model and their coefficients. Done. The R-square, we're done. Okay. But what if, next step, you have 2,000 variables in that model? Well, I mean, you can provide 2,000 variables and you can provide the weighting, the coefficients for the 2,000, but your ability to explain the model starts to become difficult, correct? So now let's move on to a nonlinear relationship. So the ability for us to explain a nonlinear relationship with that many variables is pretty much impossible. And so that's the reason, that's the black box, right? Is that it doesn't provide that information, right? It's just not, it doesn't give you which variables, because that's the other problem. And I don't want to get into too much stats, but you know, some of the coefficients are brought down to near zero, right? So meaning that they're not contributing. So our ability to even know that is because there's so many variables and so many relationships and so many levels that it's just difficult to even say which of the nodes are contributing the most. It's just not possible to do that. So explainability is the ability to, an attempt, it's actually not even an ability, it's an attempt to provide some form of idea of what it's doing. So depending on how you model, there are methodological approaches that provide that idea of what's contributing what, how it's contributing, right? So SHAP, and there's a few, you can Google it, there's a few, you know, ways to do it. But I think the easiest way for you to remember what you need to strive for is by what's called in parallel processing. So you have your model, which is fantastic, you're going to commercialize it, you're going to share it around the world, and everyone's going to be happy. But in order to perform explainability, you actually, you know, mimic the process, right? So whatever your model is, but one with one that's explainable. So you're not saying that I'm going to get exactly the same results, because if that was the case, then why would you need machine learning, right? But you're going to get like similar results. But in doing so, you're going to be able to look in to that model and say, it seems to be more this area, these types of variables, this kind of process. And that would be explainability, in the sense that you're going to just transfer that to your model. So that's quite accepted. So if you're not doing Shapley and all that, you know, doing the actual explainability methodology, which you can do, but you just can't always do that. Conceptually, that's kind of what is probably the most accepted currently, right? That might change, but for now it's just explain it as best you can using another process that you know is valid. Of course, you're not making it up, and you're saying, well, you know, in this parallel process, this is kind of what we think is going on, and so we're going to say that this is the same thing, but it's just more precise and does it better. Does that make sense? So that's explainability. Explainability is extremely difficult. That's the tough one. Interpretability is easier and is more relevant to the clinician, because explainability gives certain variables, right? You're going to say certain variables are contributing the most to the model. So even if you do Shapley and those approaches, it's going to give you which variables contributed the most, which is what you need. But you know, sometimes those variables are very abstract. And so then you're like, here you go. Here's my explainability. And people are going to say, oh, that's nice, but what's variable AZ15? And you're going to say, actually, I don't know. Oh, well, thank you for wasting everybody's time, right? So that's the problem. So interpretability is more important. And interpretability is the ability to share with your user an understanding of how your model came to the decision. So not how it operated, not how it is operating, not how it is weighted, how the nodes are weighted. No. How it came to the decision. So a perfect example of that is what students have already showed, and that is a heat map. So for in my world of imaging, it's a heat map. Because it doesn't get better than that. It's fantastic, right? Because you're showing on the image, where the algorithm, was paying attention in order for it to make its decision. So then, of course, if the clinician or whoever is using it agrees, then that's interpretability, because they're saying, oh, well, I agree with that process because that's where I would look to make my decision, right? So there's an example of interpretability, and that one is typically more important. If you're doing decision tree analysis and stuff like that, and it's very complex and whatever, so then interpretability would be to show an example or something on one. That's another one for interpretability, is if you have a model, give an example, like give an exact example of one patient, So how did it come to what was the decision, how it made the decision for one patient, or for 5 cases or something like that? That's interpretability. If you just give an overall value, right, like a performance metric, people don't really get that. They don't really understand, oh, wow, it works well overall. Okay. That's not really helping me. But if you give them an example of a patient, so here's a patient, Bob, kind of like in some of the, some of my students were giving in their presentation, actually it was me, sorry. Here's Maria that has this, and, compared to Carolina, which is that, that gives interpretability, right? Because you're sharing an example and how your model did what, and what the decision was, and all that kind of stuff. So that would be another form of interpretability. Yeah? Good? Cool. Any other questions? Yes? Okay, so complex question. You almost answered your own question with the last statement, which is ethical use of data and privacy, right? So your first thing, because that was very broad. IoT is Internet of Things, and so when you remember Internet of Things, remember data collection. Okay, that's what IoT is really all about, is data collection and use. Processing at site is edge computing, right? So anyway, but your question is federated learning, which is for training models, right? And so, as we discussed this morning, so excellent question. As we discussed this morning, the challenge, of course, is what data can you use when and where, and who gives permission, and how do you share, right? So the federated learning came around for exactly that purpose, and it's where people are like, well, I have a lot of data and I'd love to contribute, but I cannot share it. It's not permissible. I can't share it. I'm not allowed. Even if I de-identify or anonymize, it cannot leave my institution. So the thought was, okay, well, wait a minute. What if, we all shared, our results, essentially? And people are like, oh, okay, well, maybe, but then how are we going to benefit from that? So that's when federated learning came along, where you can train in your environment, upload the weights. You're all working on, so basically it's a coordinated effort, right? So you all use the same model. You all, if you make a change to the model, everybody changes the model, right? So everyone's using the same thing. But then you train on your data, and then you upload the weights, and then that's shared for other people to use those weights and train with them, and everybody's training on the same weights and whatever. So data is not leaving your institution, right? You're just giving the permission for other groups in your federated learning, connection, to use what you did exactly the same way, right? Because that's the key, right? Is everything has to be the same. so that they can benefit from the weights. And then the whole group kind of does it all together, and in the end, ta-da, you have a fantastic model, okay? That's federated learning. The problem with it, of course, is cost. So it's, because what I just described is very simplistic, and I'm sure someone who's an expert in federated learning probably said, oh my God, that was terrible. But it's not as easy as that, right? And so you have to establish servers and privacy and connectivity and all that stuff for every site. And in Canada, the estimated minimum cost to get into federated learning is $25,000, right? So it's just a lot of money. And so most sites are like, well, yeah, if it's a huge project and it's worthwhile, then they'll do it. Or basically, if someone's willing to pay, okay, But if not, they're just not going to do it, right? And that's the barrier. It only applies, in my knowledge, to very well-funded, large pan-Indian, studies, right? Where all the major sites around India are collaborating, and they need to. So thinking about it at your level, or at my level for that matter, it's a waste of time. Like it's really, I'm just being blunt. You guys know me now after a week. I'm pretty straightforward. It's just such a complex and expensive endeavor for, I'm not going to say little gains, but, are the gains really, necessary, especially with foundation models now? If people are willing to share foundational models, wow, right? We can just benefit so much from that, right? Because that was the tricky bit is how do you train on private data, right? So foundational models, people have agreed to share their data to train to a foundational model, and then those foundational weights or embeddings are shared. So you've solved the problem because you can do the same thing now, right? So it's just that initial sharing that's the problem. If that initial sharing does not exist, like there's no way that anybody is going to share to create that, then you need federated learning. I'd be a very rich man if I knew that answer. And I'm working on it. That's one of my areas of interest. But no, there's no easy way of determining that other than being in the space. So been there, done that, right? So if you take on a new project, right? Let's say you're working with ultrasound in musculoskeletal disorders, right? So joints, right? And you're working in ultrasound, and you have a new project, and you want to know how much data you need. Well, you just call me. WhatsApp. Hey, Pascal, what's up? I know you're an expert in that area. What's your experience? And I'll tell you, absolute minimum 200 to 500 per class, right? And you can say, oh, wow, thank you. So how did I know that? Well, because I've done it for years. So I can tell you my experience. But even still, I could be wrong, right? Because maybe the ROI that you're interested in, you need more. Or it's so easy, like you need less. Right? Like in the back of the knee, Baker's cyst, right? You get this cyst in the back of the knee, which is a complication that you get ultrasounds of the knee done for, right? So you fall off your bike, you get an ultrasound done, they're looking for inflammation or whatever. Pain in the knee, arthritis, they're looking for arthritis. Pain in the knee, don't know what it is. Oh, it could be a Baker's cyst. Okay, so Baker's cyst is like, wow. You can't miss a Baker's cyst. Like it's behind the knee and it's there and it's like, wow, I know. So, if you had to train an algorithm on it, first of all, why would you? But let's say you wanted to train an algorithm on it, it would probably be very easy. So then you would need less data. Does that make sense? Kind of. So in anything you do, it's going to be that, right? definitely the work that my PhD student is doing may contribute to assisting people in estimating the size, but we wouldn't, you wouldn't use it for something really basic like, X-ray looking for, I don't know, even pneumonia or something, which is pretty straightforward. You wouldn't really need that. But for very complex MRI or CT or PET or something like that, very heterogeneous data, then what we're doing would be helpful, right, in giving you an estimate of what you need. Does that make sense? And that's going to make it harder. Exactly right. As soon as you start doing fusion, it's easy to remember. The more complex, the more data you need, right? So if you're doing fusion, you're going to need more data. Yeah, generally. I mean, if you can simplify it like we did using a scalar value, right? That kept the requirement lower, but we still had if I remember correctly, almost 900 CTs, brain CTs. That's still 900, right? It's not bad, right? It's pretty big data set. And so, yeah, it's generally, it's just going to increase your sample size. Any form of complexity will increase your sample size for sure. But there's no answer, no. Sorry. Any other questions? Yes, sir. What a great question. That really is a very appropriate question. It really is. And that is like, where are we going, right? So how are we going to incorporate this? So definitely, I come from a software development background as well, and I started programming in the 80s, and then throughout the 80s and 90s, programmers were gods. They really were. Because it was new, right? This whole concept of programming and creating software for computers was not very complex, but very difficult to do because of all the restrictions, right? So memory was the big one, right? So who controlled the environment? You did. You were in control. The programmer would say, this is what I can do for you. And you would say, oh, thank you, right? So that's no longer the case. Sadly, you guys missed that. Now it's the user. The user is absolutely in control. So the programmer must provide what the user asks for, even if, no matter how outlandish the request, you need to find a way to give it to the user or they're walking away. And the reason they can is because they walk away to somebody else who can do it. That's the problem. If truly nobody can do it, then fine, you're okay. But you do need to listen to the user. And so to answer your question, AI is going to be invisible. So ideally what it's going to do is not be seen, but to improve all processes. Like literally improve all processes. So is the physician going to be walking around with some kind of funky helmet and some weird, no. The physician is going to walk around just like they are today. Same way. But the tools that they have are all going to be integrated with AI. And the less anybody sees or hears or thinks AI, the better. That's going to be the goal for the integration of AI into what we do, is exactly that. It's just going to be, transparent. Like you're just not going to know. Having said that, there will also need to be like almost full departments for AI in the institution. So you're going to say, why do you need that? So is that going to be your job? No, actually it's not. So there's not going to be like a room full of programmers, in every institution just programming. No. What you are going to need to have are committees. So yeah, you think, oh God, more administration. But you really are going to need them. And those committees are going to be responsible for the integration and adoption of AI in their institution. So meaning you have to have a list of all processes in the hospital that are actually using AI, and they need to be monitored. So meaning they have to keep tabs on them. Because just as we talked about this week, you have data drift, right? You have this shift, right, in attention because the disease is progressing in society. The technology is changing on the variables of input for that algorithm. So these things change, and so then the accuracy of your algorithms are going to fluctuate. And so you need a committee, you need some kind of oversight that's going to check that. Is it still working the way it's supposed to? Should I be validating? Is it now unethical? Right? So think of that. Like, maybe today it's okay to do something, but in 6 months from now, or well, maybe in years from now, it's no longer permitted, or it is permitted now, right? So then your algorithm's out of date. So there's definitely going to need to be oversight in the hospital for exactly that. So then you're going to have this AI, committee and little group. Maybe you will have a few engineers, right? Why not, right? You have a few engineers that understand how it's done, and so they'll consult the committee and say, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, we'll have to retrain here. We have whatever. So there'll be that. But the actual use of it is, in my opinion, this is all my opinion, of course. It's just going to be transparent. You're just not going to see it. You're just going to make physicians are going to be using their phone more or their tablet more. They may have some VR goggles or something, maybe, for visualizing things in 3D. So they'll just take it off. Actually, it's not going to be goggles anymore. Have you heard the all of the hype, right, about the glasses, right? So Apple was supposed to come out with it 4 years ago? Google came out with it like 5-6 years ago. The idea of AR glasses, right? Just failed. And it's just because the technology wasn't there yet and the adoption's not ready. It is coming. Absolutely, it's coming. Okay? And that physicians will be wearing. So physicians will wear glasses, and inside the glasses will be popped up information that they need real time. So if they're with a patient, if they wanted to, they could probably see some facts on the patient that will pop up in their glasses, in the inside of their glasses. But more realistically, will also be examinations. So for instance, if they're examining, if they're looking at like a skin lesion, right? They'll just look at the skin lesion, right? And the AI will, because there'll be cameras, right, on the glasses, right? And it will identify the lesion for them, put it up right in the, or maybe not identify, but just say, hey, whoa, pay attention to that, or something like that, to begin with. Eventually we'll identify. That's absolutely, I think, is going to be in our future, in the physician's future. I mean, why? I mean, of course, right? Because then you don't even have to whip your phone out. You don't even have to, let me look at that, right? No, it's right in the glasses, right? So that's probably not far away that's going to be happening, because we're actually, my company is an Apple developer shop, and we've been asked to develop stuff for those glasses like 2 years ago. But we stopped because we just realized nobody's taking it up right now. So as a company, it's not worth our effort as a company to develop stuff that's just not being taken up yet. We're too small a company. If we were a big company, maybe, but we're such a small company, we can't spend time on that. But it's coming. Like I can tell you that's going to be coming. And you guys are going to wear it. I'm going to wear it cycling. So I'm a cyclist, and so when I'm cycling, I'm constantly looking down at my little computer on on my handlebars, just to see where I'm at, how I'm feeling and where I'm going. But it already exists. It's just not for sale. In my glasses now will be all that information, right? It's going to tell me where I'm at, where my heart is, where my training status is, and all that kind of stuff will be in my glasses, right? So then I don't have to look down anymore. And then you're going to have, the ability to detect stuff on the road and warnings, and you bet, it's all coming for sure. That's cool tech that's going to be coming, and of course it's going to cross over into medicine. Like, why not? Why wouldn't it, right? Like, that'll be neat. That'll be very neat, for sure. Good question, though. That's good. What else? Questions on projects? On your projects? No? That good, eh? So the only thing I can absolutely share in terms of the projects is, that was really a beginning, and I think you can do so much more, for sure. I am saying that in a nice way, by the way. I'm not saying, oh my God, that was terrible, do more. No. I'm just saying you certainly can progress and do more on your own. Like, you don't need necessarily someone helping you out. You can do it on your own. If you're a big enough group, everyone's going to think of something and you can do it. Having a little guidance from a prof or something is nice. It's helpful. But you can do all of this stuff on your own, right? So you should go to my website, actually. And so if you go to my website and go to student experience, I get that one. I get in trouble all the time because I work with students and I work with patients, and I'm constantly saying the wrong one. So if you go there, you'll get student experience. And if you read the experience, you'll read there how they did exactly what you just did. Okay, so what you did, though, you did it in a week, right? My undergrads that are coming from engineering, just like you, computer science or whatever, they spend a semester with me, right? They do a credit, right? And so they'll explain to you on their personal experience, the ones that wish to put it on the website, of course, what was their thought process? How did they find it went? Was it hard? Was it easy? Whatever. And you'll probably appreciate their comments because it's probably exactly what you just went through, but they went through it at a slightly higher level because they were doing it for credit and they did it for a whole semester or a whole year. It's a year course, so they would do it for an entire year. And you'll just see it's all doable. I mean, there's a few tiers. It's pretty rare. Honestly, it's pretty rare. But sometimes it gets really stressful. Like, oh God, I'm not going to finish on time. I have literally, during these sessions and then when I'm driving here, no joke, I'm constantly talking to students because their project is due next week. So they're constantly asking, oh my God, my numbers are not right, and they're still running, like you guys, training data, and I'm like, that's not working, whatever. Anyway, so it does sometimes get right to the end, right? But in general, it's very doable. It's never easy. You'll see if you read the comments. It's never easy, but it's always rewarding, right? So just to say, that's the best part of it, and hopefully, this workshop will inspire you to do that. There you go. I think we're good, right? We're on time?
Thank you, Team 6 and 7, for the demonstration. And thank you, sir, for the wonderful insights and inputs for our students. We will break for lunch now, and we'll be back here at 2 o'clock for the test and the feedback session. Once we finish the test and feedback, we will proceed to the valedictory. Thank you.